Unit 15. I want to give you a quick overview of the different tasks that you'll be doing over the next 11 weeks and the areas that you can expect to be covering. And as per usual, I would strongly recommend that you have a look at the specification. It's available on the Cambridge Technical's website. It gives you a really good idea of the teaching material and also of the tasks that you'll need to complete. 60 guided learning hours, same as the other units for the coursework, really. Let's delve a little bit deeper into what's driving this unit. We know that it's got to do with gaming, and we know that it's got to do with prototyping. There are several strands that run throughout this unit, and the first one is the design element and the prototype element. So to that end, you are going to design a game in response to a brief, and this is all going to culminate in you producing a prototype which you'll present, and then you'll get some feedback and you make improvements to, and you reflect on it. I don't want to get too ahead of it, but that's the overview, is that you will learn a bit about game design, and then over the course of the first 5 or 6 weeks you'll produce the prototype, and then you will improve it and reflect on how close it was to the brief that you were actually given. So in order for that to happen, when we look at P1, which we'll do shortly, you can expect to learn a bit about game mechanics, about the considerations that you'll need to take on board when you're looking at how you might build a game. But you're also going to have to use game design software, and although you're not given a huge amount of time for this, it's worth understanding that you are at some point going to have to look at the programming logic, so iteration and selection. Don't get too scared by that, because it's not a computer science qualification, but you are going to need to understand some basic constructs. It's worth remembering that you already know how to do all of these because you play games. You might not know that you know, but these are concepts that you do actually understand. So that's something you'll need to do over the next 4 or 5 weeks. Moving on from that, you'll need to think about the interface design itself, and what makes a good interface design, and considerations that you should have when you are building your game in response to a brief that you're given. Does it suit the audience? Is it genre appropriate? Does it do what it's supposed to do? All of those sorts of basic questions. Moving on from that, you'll obviously build your prototype, as you can see there, and you will need to demonstrate an element of your game. I think the key thing to remember is you don't have to build an entire working game, because for an 11-week course that would be ludicrous. You can go for a 3-year degree course on game design. So this is just to give you the rudimentaries, the important detail that you'll need in terms of game mechanics, how do you build a game, what sits behind that design process. Alright, so you can see in front of you, these are all the tasks that you will be doing over the course of the next 11 or 12 weeks. The way the tasks are laid out is very similar to the other unit. So you've got 6 past tasks, you've got 3 merit tasks, and you have 2 distinction tasks. The order is slightly different to what you're used to. However, it's still organised in a very similar way. So what I'm going to do very quickly is run through each of these in turn and just give you a few words of an overview so you understand what each one entails. So let's begin with looking at P1, and P1 is about describing the key features in a range of games. So typically you'll look at 3 or so games, and these games will be very different, so different genre. So for example, maybe an arcade game, maybe a simulation game, maybe an action game. And for each of those 3 games, you're going to analyse it through the lenses of game design. So looking at the characters, looking at first person or third person view, thinking about the reward system, thinking about the win state of the game, thinking about achievements, and so on. And that's all in the teaching material, which again is on the specification, which you'll go through when you're doing P1. But you will go through that teaching material, and then you'll be looking at 3 of those games using those lenses. So that's P1. M1 is actually just an extension of P1, and in fact I would say it's a very simple extension of P1, because you're going to look at the same 3 games, except this time you're going to use the lens of genre and the lens of audience to say why what your 3 games are suitable for different genre and a different audience. So once you've done P1 and M1, your next task is to go on to P2. They simply want you to explain the benefits of 2 different types of prototypes, to explain what they are and the benefits of those 2 different types of prototypes. Okay, so once you've done P2, the next step after P2 is to go on to P3. And P3 is where you produce the design documentation for your game. So by the end of P3, you need to have produced everything that you could show to your customer and say, this is the game I'm going to make, do you want to go ahead and pay me to build it? Alright, so there's also an add-on to P3, which is M2, and M2 asks you to create an alternative interface design. It's actually logical if you produce your work for P3 and you simply produce an alternative interface design as part of it, and then that becomes an add-on that you can put at the end of it. But that's M2. So the next thing you need to think about after M2 is P4. And P4, they want a flowchart which shows the flow of your game. The next thing you need to think about is D1, and that involves justifying your design choices. You've done very much the same piece of work for Unit 6, and you're going to justify how your design matches the brief that you were given. So having done the distinction task, the first distinction task, your next job after that is to go on to P5. P5, you're going to build your prototype. Right, so P5, once that's done, your next focus is P6. Presentation. You've done this before. You give a presentation to me and you'll get feedback on it. And once you've had the feedback from P6, that will then take you neatly onto M3, where you analyse your feedback and you make changes. And all that's left then is D2. And D2 is asking you to evaluate both the prototype and the design that you made. So if you think about it, you made your design and then you made your prototype, and you're going to evaluate both of those against the brief. How accurately did you answer it?